Welcome back to It Came From the 80's, the new series where we dissect some of the greatest horror movies to come out of the 1980s and why they became the classics that they did. So today on Top 5 Scary Videos, this is It Came From the 80's, this time with Friday the 13th, a highly demanded film that I can't wait to examine. Before we begin though, be sure to stick around until the end of the video where I'll be responding to some of your comments. So, let's jump in. Friday the 13th was released back in 1980 and directed by Sean S. Cunningham, who, outside of Friday the 13th, was known for little else, with films like The Art of Marriage, Case of the Full Moon Murders, and A Stranger Is Watching occupying space on his resume. The film itself tells the story of a group of teenage camp counselors who are murdered one by an unknown killer while they attempt to reopen an abandoned summer camp. Now, Friday the 13th was initially prompted by the success of John Carpenter's Halloween, with Sean S. Cunningham putting out an advertisement to sell his film in early 1979, while Victor Miller, the writer, was still drafting the screenplay. Cunningham took a lot of his cues when going into the film from Wes Craven, our last topic of conversation, with Cunningham having worked with the filmmaker on The Last House on the Left. Inspired by Halloween, Cunningham wanted Friday the 13th to be shocking, visually stunning, and a film that would make audience members jump out of their seats. Now, the original screenplay was tentatively titled A Long Night at Camp Blood. However, when working on redrafts, Cunningham proposed the title Friday the 13th. But of course, he had a fear that someone may have already owned the rights, prompting Cunningham to commission a New York advertising agency to develop the concept of the Friday the 13th logo, which consisted of big block letters bursting through a pane of glass. An iconic image for an iconic movie. By mid-1979, Victor Miller had completed the screenplay and of course was over the moon at the idea that he had created a serial killer who would turn out to be somebody's mother, a murderer whose only motivation was to love and protect her child. I quote, "I took motherhood and turned it on its head, and I think that was great fun. Mrs. Voorhees was the mother I'd always wanted, a mother who would have killed for her kids." Saying that though, as we know in future sequels, the franchise was ultimately changed so that Jason Voorhees was the killer, something that Miller did not agree with. I quote, "Jason was dead from the very beginning. He was a victim, not a villain." Preach, Victor, preach. Now of course in the first Friday the 13th, Jason made a haunting cameo at the end of the movie, a scene which was not initially used in the original script, with Miller's final draft actually ending with Alice merely floating on the lake without Jason emerging from the water to attack her. Jason's appearance came about after a suggestion from makeup designer Tom Savini, who stated, "The whole reason for the cliffhanger at the end was I had just seen Carrie, so we thought we needed a chair jumper like that, and I said, let's bring in Jason." Now the film was of course a success nonetheless, with it going on to spark 11 more sequels, including a crossover with our previous horror movie villain, Freddy Krueger, in the iconic movie Freddy vs. Jason. What a classic. Now, after seeing the later titles in the franchise, going back to watch the original can be a little surprising. It's tamer than you would expect, with little gore and hardly any nudity, and of course, there's no hockey mask. If you're in search of a hockey mask wearing killer, you actually need to fast forward to the second sequel, where we get our first real appearance from Jason. Well, the killer Jason, not the drowned boy. Now, as previously stated, Halloween began the slasher genre, but it can be said that it took Friday the 13th to pave the road. Although the film itself isn't the best, with characters that are paper thin and the story existing entirely as an excuse for carnage, it was instead Jason which made the franchise such a success. And of course, above all else, the first film actually wasn't even scary. In parts it was atmospheric, yes, but that was simply down to the low-key style, because of money. Now let's talk about Jason. Jason, as aforementioned, would become the series' flagship killer. However, he would not make his first real appearance until part 2. He lives primarily in the backstory and appears in a dream sequence, but other than that, he's not relevant to the events at Camp Crystal Lake, until the end of the movie that is, and more importantly, he is not the killer. A quote from the movie goes like this: "There's a legend around here, a killer buried but not dead, a curse on Crystal Lake, a death curse, Jason Voorhees curse. They say he died as a boy but he keeps coming back. Few have seen him and lived, some have even tried to stop him. No one can. People forget he's down there, waiting." Now moving forward in the franchise, this statement held true. Following the events of the first movie and after having witnessed his mother's murder spree, Jason, also having witnessed his mother's death, grabbed grabbed her sweater, pants, severed head, and the machete that killed her, and returned to his shack with them, placing the objects on a crude altar he had constructed. This is what would kickstart his murderous rampage, beginning in the summer of 1984, when a brand new group of teenagers occupied the nearby Packanack Lodge. Now, I won't go into too many details because I don't want to spoil the movie for any of you. What I can say about Jason though is that he has superhuman strength that is shown in part 2, where he is shown to have enhanced strength capable of impaling victims with ease, as well as breaking out a window with one single shot. He also has pain resistance, stealth, intelligence, revenant zombie physiology, supernatural strength, immortality, regeneration, resurrection, supernatural durability, teleportation, and finally, weapons proficiency. The latter being incredibly important in the later movies. For example, part 2, where he used an ice pick, barbed wire, a tree, hammer, machete, spear, knife, pitchfork, and a pickaxe. Yeah, Jason loves his weapons. Now, some trivia for you Friday the 13th lovers out there. Did you know that Jason has the most kills out of any other horror film slasher, with his total number being around 151? So now you know all the details. How exactly was the film such a success? Firstly, upon release back on May 9th, 1980, the film earned approximately $5.8 million in its opening weekend, before finishing domestically with $39 million, making it the 18th highest grossing film of that year, putting it in direct competition with The Shining, Dressed to Kill, The Fog, and Prom Night. Now, the critical response was of course mixed, with Linda Gross of the LA Times referring to it as, I quote, a silly, boring, youth-geared horror movie. However, she did praise the musical score. Many compared the movie unfavorably against Halloween and stated that the film was minimal on plot, suspense, and characterization. However, its legacy certainly speaks for itself. Friday the 13th was what initiated the subgenre of the stalker or slasher film, and in turn instigated a rush of films to follow in its footsteps. The film, though panned, has attained a significant cult following over the years, and in 2017, Complex ranked the film 9th on a list of the best slasher films of all time. As a standalone movie, Friday the 13th is unremarkable and easily forgettable. However, the same words cannot be said to describe its impact upon cinema as a whole. If Halloween created the slasher, Friday the 13th is definitely its offspring. Without this franchise, the face of horror would be drastically different. And though opinions may vary, you can't discredit the impact the entire franchise had on the horror genre as a whole. Because what Friday the 13th does right is that it takes the real world of the 1980s and demonstrates to teens that they can survive it, given the right set of skills. Respect. Well, there we have it. That was our breakdown of Friday the 13th. What film would you like us to tackle next on It Came From the 80s? Leave us all your thoughts and feelings in the comments down below. Before I go though, I just want to respond to a few comments from one of our last videos, Top 5 Scary Korean Urban Legends. Sardeth Kingfire said, 312, Lucy is possessed, confirmed. That was actually me laughing, but good to know you guys can't handle that. Duly noted. Bobby McGrother said, Lucy, be my friend or don't. I mean, do what you want, I'm not your dad. Wait, you're not? What a disappointment. He never did return from the store when he went to get milk. Thorin693 said, dressed in white and long hair, is Lucy a virgin ghost? I can confirm that I am definitely not. Again, that's Dad, look away. And on that note, if you haven't already, be sure to give this video a big thumbs up, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss another scary vid. And until next time, see you later.